The year was 1902 when the dusty plains of New Mexico stretched endlessly under the merciless sun, where survival meant adaptation and true worth was measured not by appearance but by the strength of one's spirit. This is the extraordinary tale of Elena Fuentes, a woman labeled corbata odd, unmarriageable, too educated for her own good, and Mateo Hernandez, a widower with 8 children, whose unexpected proposal would transform both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow we've prepared something even more powerful for you. The summer of 1902 descended upon the small settlement of Esperanza with unrelenting heat, baking the adobe walls and turning the narrow dirt streets into ribbons of dust. The residents moved slowly through their daily routines, conserving energy during the hottest hours, gathering in shaded courtyards to share meals and stories as evening approached. For most, life followed predictable patterns established through generations of tradition. But in one modest home at the edge of town, 28-year-old Elena Fuentes sat alone at her small wooden desk, carefully grading the final assignments from her students before the summer break. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her intelligent eyes reflected both determination and resignation. Though her teaching position at Esperanza's small school had provided purpose and modest independence, the whispers that followed her through town had grown increasingly difficult to ignore. Elena traced her finger along a student's carefully written sentences, her mind drifting to the conversation she'd overheard between her cousin Mariana and Señora Ortiz at the market just days earlier. "Such a shame about Elena," Señora Ortiz had whispered, not quietly enough. "Nearly 30, and still unmarried. Too many books, too many opinions. A corbata. What man wants a woman who corrects his grammar?" "My uncle has tried to arrange 3 matches," Mariana had replied. "Each time the men find some excuse. It's the education that frightens them away. What will become of her when her father passes? A woman alone has few options in these parts." The memory stung, though Elena had heard variations of this conversation for years. Corbata. The odd one out, the misfit, the tie that doesn't match. The education her father had insisted upon, sending her to the convent school in Santa Fe, against her mother's objections, had become both her salvation and her isolation. A sharp knock at the door startled Elena from her thoughts. She set aside the papers and smoothed her simple cotton dress before answering. "Uncle Roberto." She greeted the portly man who stood on her doorstep, his expression a mixture of determination and discomfort. "Please come in." Roberto Fuentes stepped inside, declining to sit when Elena offered. He removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. Since her father's death 6 months earlier, Uncle Roberto had assumed responsibility for family decisions, particularly those concerning his unmarried niece. "Elena, I'll speak plainly," he began without preamble. "The school term is ending, and the council has decided not to renew your teaching position for the fall." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "But why? The children are learning well. Their examination results were the highest in the district." Roberto shifted uncomfortably. "Señor Mendoza's son is returning from university in Mexico City. He will take the teaching position. It's more appropriate." "More appropriate because he is a man," Elena stated flatly. Roberto's expression hardened. "It's the natural order of things, Elena. Women teach in the home, to their own children. Your situation is equal. Pagari a cumpre calora. Convente robrex locri. Cumpre calocri. Num veati estret pegli. Cumpre caloma. Comprex locri torocri. Combrex liste robrex locri." "And what am I to do for income?" Elena asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "My father's house is mine, but I must still eat. That's why I've come. I've found a solution." Roberto straightened his shoulders. "The widow Señora Vargas in Cielo Azul needs help with her sewing business. She's agreed to take you on," provide room and board in exchange for your labor. It's a respectable position for a woman in your circumstances." "My circumstances?" Elena repeated incredulously. "You mean for a corbata? An unmarriageable woman with too much education?" Roberto flushed. "Mind your tone, Elena. This arrangement is the best option available. The alternative." He left the implication hanging. The alternative was charity, becoming the pitied relative passed between family homes, always an extra mouth to feed, always reminded of her failure to fulfill a woman's proper destiny. The first day passed uneventfully, the wagon making steady progress along well-established trails. They stopped at midday to rest the mules and share a simple meal, then continued until sunset, when Francisco established camp near a small stream. Elena helped Luz prepare dinner while Francisco tended the animals, the children exploring the immediate surroundings under their mother's watchful eye. That night, lying on her bedroll beneath a vast canopy of stars, Elena allowed herself to acknowledge the fear she had kept carefully controlled. Her entire life had been uprooted by others' decisions. Her future now depended on the goodwill of a stranger in a strange town. The widow Vargas might be kind or cruel, generous or miserly. The work might be tolerable or crushing. Elena had no choice but to accept whatever awaited her. Yet beneath the fear ran a thin current of possibility. Perhaps distance from Esperanza would allow her to rebuild herself, to exist beyond the stifling label of corbata. Perhaps in Cielo Azul, she might find some small measure of the independence her education had promised, but her community had denied. The second day of travel brought increasing discomfort as the terrain grew more challenging, in casi daines. In casi dame heat more intense. By mid-afternoon, the water in their canteens had grown warm and unpleasant, the children fretful in the stifling heat of the wagon bed. Elena's cotton dress clung to her back, thus coating her skin and hair, despite the kerchief she had tied to protect her face. "We should reach Cielo Azul before sundown," Francisco announced, offering the first real conversation of the day. "The road improves after the next ridge." Elena nodded acknowledgement, too parched and weary for unnecessary words. The promise of arrival brought both relief and renewed anxiety. What reputation had preceded her? Had Uncle Roberto written to Señora Vargas about his problematic niece, the educated corbata who couldn't secure a husband? As the wagon crested the final ridge, Cielo Azul came into view below, significantly larger than Esperanza, with adobe buildings clustered around a central plaza, a proper church with a bell tower, and numerous outbuildings spreading along a small river that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Even from a distance, the signs of greater prosperity were evident in the well-maintained roads and the number of horses and wagons visible. "Señora Vargas lives near the plaza," Luz informed Elena, breaking her usual reticence. "Her sewing shop is well regarded. You are fortunate in your placement." The words were clearly meant as encouragement, though they only heightened Elena's awareness of her dependence on others' charity. Still, she mustered a grateful smile. "Thank you for bringing me safely here. Your family has been most kind." They entered Cielo Azul as the sun was setting, the main street still active with the day's final business. People glanced curiously at the wagon, assessing the newcomers with the natural interest of a close-knit community. Elena felt the weight of their stares, wondering how quickly word would spread about the new woman in town, how soon the whispers of corbata might follow. Francisco directed the wagon to a two-story building facing the plaza. A painted sign above the door read Vargas Costuras, Vargas Sewing. Before they could announce their arrival, the door opened to reveal a stout woman in her 50s, her gray-streaked hair pulled back severely, her expression businesslike rather than welcoming. "You must be the Santiagos," she stated, her gaze moving efficiently over the wagon before settling on Elena. "And you are Elena Fuentes." "Yes, Señora Vargas," Elena replied, climbing down from the wagon, with as much dignity as her travel-worn state allowed. "Thank you for this opportunity." Mercedes Vargas assessed Elena with unabashed scrutiny, her eyes noting every detail from the dusty hem of Elena's dress to the simple wooden comb securing her hair. "Your uncle described you as educated. Can you cipher as well as so, Añora?" "I taught mathematics as well as letters at our school." Something like approval flickered across the widow's face. "Good. I need someone who can manage accounts as well as a needle. Too many girls can barely count their stitches, let alone balance ledgers." She turned to Francisco and Luz. "Thank you for delivering her safely. I've arranged payment with the merchant Ortega. You can collect it at his store before you leave tomorrow." The businesslike dismissal made clear that the Santiagos would not be offered hospitality for the night. Francisco nodded, apparently unsurprised. "Vaya con Dios, Elena," he said simply before directing the wagon toward the town stables. Elena watched them depart with a pang of loss, the last connection to her former life disappearing down the dusty street. She squared her shoulders and turned to face Señora Vargas and whatever future awaited her in Cielo Azul. "Bring your things," the widow instructed, already turning back toward the shop entrance. "Your room is above the workroom. You'll begin learning my methods tomorrow." The room, when Elena was shown to it, proved smaller than she had anticipated. Space for a narrow bed, a washstand, and little else. Her 3 bundles looked pitiful in the corner, representing the sum total of her worldly possessions. The window overlooked a small courtyard, offering air but little light. "You take meals with me," Señora Vargas explained from the doorway. "Breakfast at dawn, dinner after the shop closes. Sunday mornings are for church, afternoons for rest. All other times belong to the business. Is that understood?" "Yes, señora," Elena replied, recognizing that whatever the constraints, this arrangement offered shelter and sustenance when few other options existed for a woman in her position. "Your uncle wrote that you're considered unmarriageable in Esperanza," the widow continued bluntly. "A corbata, he called you. Too educated, too opinionated for a proper wife." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks but maintained her composure. "My father valued education. He believed women's minds deserved cultivation as much as men's siglo." To her surprise, Señora Vargas's stern expression softened slightly. "My late husband held similar views, unconventional though they were. It made him an unusual merchant but a good one. It's why I was able to continue his business after his passing, rather than selling to the first man who offered." She straightened, the momentary connection giving way to practical matters. "Rest now. Morning comes early. And there is much to learn." Left alone, Elena sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the exhaustion of travel and emotional strain to surface. This room, this building, this town, all strange, all temporary, all dependent on the goodwill of a woman she had just met. Yet what choice remained? At 28, without husband or immediate family, in a society that valued women primarily as wives and mothers, Elena's options had narrowed to this single path. She unpacked her few possessions, arranging them with care to create some semblance of familiarity in the foreign space. Her father's book of poetry she placed beneath her pillow, a talisman against despair, a reminder of the man who had believed in her capacity for more than society prescribed. That night, as unfamiliar sounds of a strange town filtered through her window, Elena whispered the verses her father had loved most, the words bringing momentary comfort. "The soul that sees beauty may sometimes walk alone, but the light remains undimmed, though the path be overgrown." Mornings arrived with the insistent ringing of the church bells, followed immediately by Señora Vargas's brisk knock. Elena dressed quickly in her cleanest dress, pinned her hair neatly, and descended to the kitchen where a simple breakfast of corn tortillas, beans, and strong coffee awaited. "We open at 8, the widow explained between efficient bites. "Before customers arrive, I'll show you my system for tracking orders, payments, and inventory. You'll need to understand the business fully before touching needle to fabric." The morning passed in a whirlwind of information. Ledgers filled with careful notations of client measurements, fabric costs, payment schedules, shelves of materials organized by type, color, and quality, patterns for everything from simple work shirts to elaborate wedding gowns. Señora Vargas's system revealed a meticulous mind and a thriving business built on reputation and reliability. Most of our work comes from the wealthier families in town, she explained, though we also serve the church, create investments and altar cloths. Additionally, we supply the merchant Ortega with ready-made items for those who cannot afford custom work. Elena absorbed the information with the same methodical attention she had applied to learning Latin grammar and geometric principles. By midday she had begun to understand not just the organization but the underlying philosophy of the business: quality without compromise, fair prices without exploitation, personal attention to each client's needs. When the shop opened at noon, Elena was stationed at a small desk near the rear, instructed to observe rather than interact as Señora Vargas attended to a stream of customers. Women selecting fabrics for new dresses, men ordering shirts for special occasions, a young couple discussing requirements for a trousseau. The widow's manner transformed subtly with each client, stern but respectful with the men, collaborative with the women, gently authoritative with the young couple. By day's end, Elena's head swam with names, faces, and details of dozens of ongoing projects. As they closed the shop and prepared the evening meal together, she ventured a question that had formed throughout the day. Señora Vargas, how did you learn this business? Did your husband teach you? The widow paused in her chopping of vegetables, considering the question. Antonio recognized my aptitude for numbers and organization early in our marriage. While other merchants kept their wives ignorant of business matters, he insisted I understand every aspect. When consumption took him 5 years ago, I already knew how to continue what we had built together. She resumed her work, adding, many expected me to sell or take a male partner. Some still believe a woman cannot manage such an enterprise alone. Each successful year proves them wrong. Elena recognized in the widow's words the same quiet defiance her father had shown in educating his daughter despite community disapproval. Perhaps Señora Vargas was not simply offering employment, but a different model of womanhood, one defined by competence rather than conformity. The day settled into a predictable rhythm. Elena's quick mind and attention to detail earned grudging approval from the widow, who gradually entrusted her with greater responsibility. First managing the ledgers, then handling certain regular customers, finally beginning to learn the actual craft of tailoring and dressmaking. The work, though demanding, offered satisfaction in its precision and creativity. Sundays brought their own routine: church in the morning, where Elena sat beside Señora Vargas, conscious of the community's curious assessment of the newcomer from Esperanza. No one mentioned the word corbata directly, but she felt the weight of speculation in the glances that followed her through the plaza after services. The quiet Sunday afternoons became precious time for reflection. Sometimes Elena read from her father's poetry book in the small courtyard behind the shop. Sometimes wrote letters to Mariana that could only be sent when a traveler headed toward Esperanza. Sometimes simply sat watching the changing patterns of light on the adobe walls as the sun moved westward. 3 months passed in this manner, the initial strangeness of Cielo Azul gradually giving way to familiarity, if not quite belonging. Elena had proven her value to Señora Vargas's business, earning, if not friendship then a form of professional respect from the widow. Several of the regular customers now asked specifically for the new girl with the good eye for color, and Elena had begun to develop her own small innovations in the cutting and construction of garments. Yet beneath this surface adaptation, Elena remained acutely aware of her precarious position. She was neither family nor truly independent, neither fully accepted nor completely rejected by the community. Her future remained contingent on Señora Vargas's continued good health and goodwill. The label that had followed her from Esperanza, Corbata the Misfit, might be unspoken in Cielo Azul, but its shadow lingered. This tenuous equilibrium was disrupted on a scorching August afternoon when an unusual customer entered the shop. Elena was alone at the counter, Señora Vargas having gone to deliver completed work to the church. The bell above the door announced the arrival of a tall man in his early 40s, his clothing practical but well-maintained, his face weathered from outdoor work but handsome in a severe way, with intelligent eyes that surveyed the shop with quick assessment. "Good afternoon, señor," Elena greeted him with professional courtesy. "How may Vargas Costuras assist you today?" The man approached the counter, removing his hat to reveal dark hair, streaked with premature silver at the temples. "I need clothes for children," he stated directly. "Many children, growing children who wear through knees and elbows faster than saints' patience." Elena blinked at the unusual request. "Perhaps you could be more specific about the number and sizes of these children, señor?" "Hernandez. Mateo Hernandez." He set his hat on the counter with a decisive motion. 8 children. 4 boys, 4 girls. Ages from 14 to 3 years. A woman with education who could teach his children, manage his household, provide motherly care, all without the typical expectation of bearing more children or bringing a substantial dowry. Understanding dawned. "You think he views me as a potential wife?" "I think he is a practical man with overwhelming responsibilities who recognizes efficiency when he sees it." Señora Vargas returned to her ledger, adding, "Just remember that being valued for usefulness is not the same as being valued for yourself." The warning lingered in Elena's mind through the evening and into the following day, as she accompanied Señora Vargas to the Hernandez home. The house, when they reached it, proved larger than Elena had expected, a rambling adobe structure with recent additions visible in the slightly different coloration of the walls. A small orchard of fruit trees occupied one side of the property, while a vegetable garden, somewhat neglected but still productive, spread behind the house. They were met at the gate by a girl of proprietor Gargatha Contecar Coterhas, her resemblance to Mateo Hernandez unmistakable in the serious set of her mouth and the intelligent assessment in her eyes. "Isabella Hernandez," she introduced herself with formal politeness. "Thank you for coming, Señora Vargas, Señorita Fuentes. Father has assembled everyone in the main room for the measurements." The scene inside bordered on cheerful chaos. 7 children of descending ages arranged roughly by height, with the 3-year-old being unsuccessfully contained by an older brother. Mateo Hernandez stood to one side, attempting to maintain order with the resigned expression of a man accustomed to fighting losing battles against the natural energy of childhood. "Attention all of you," he called, his voice carrying authority without harshness. "These ladies will measure each of you for new clothes. You will stand still, follow instructions and behave with the respect you've been taught." The measuring process proved more complex than Elena had anticipated. Each child required multiple measurements, carefully recorded in Señora Vargas's notebook, with additional notes about individual preferences and needs. Reinforced knees for the active boys, room for growth in the shoulders of the oldest son, who was clearly approaching a growth spurt. Special attention to the delicate embroidery requested by the second daughter who showed artistic inclinations. Throughout the process, Elena became increasingly aware of Isabella's attention. The girl observed each notation with keen interest, occasionally asking precise questions about how measurements translated to pattern adjustments. Her intelligence was evident, as was her hunger for knowledge beyond the practical domestic skills she had clearly mastered from necessity. As they were completing the final measurements for the youngest child, a small boy with solemn eyes who clung to his older sister's hand, Isabella approached Elena directly. "Is it true you taught mathematics, Señorita Fuentes, and natural philosophy?" Elena smiled, recognizing the barely contained eagerness beneath the girl's composed exterior. "Yes, among other subjects. Do you enjoy numbers, Isabella?" The girl's face brightened. "Very much. Father has taught us basic ciphering for household accounts, but I want to understand more. How to calculate area and volume. How to predict quantities and rates of change." "Isabella, Mateo Hernandez's voice interrupted, gentle but cautionary. Señorita Fuentes is here on business, not to provide tutoring. It's quite all right, Elena assured him, moved by the girl's genuine intellectual curiosity. Mathematics was my favorite subject to teach. Perhaps, if Señora Vargas permits, Isabela could visit the shop sometime to see how we apply calculations to pattern making and business management. Señora Vargas looked up from her notebook, her expression unreadable. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. The girl could come on Thursday afternoons when business is slower. It would be educational to observe practical application of mathematical principles. The look of gratitude on Isabela's face was matched by the thoughtful assessment in her father's eyes, as he regarded Elena with new consideration. The moment was interrupted by the youngest boy tugging at Mateo's trouser leg, demanding attention in the universal language of tired children everywhere. As they prepared to depart, measurements complete and initial fabric selections discussed, Mateo Hernandez walked them to the gate. "Thank you for your patience with my brood," he said, his normally serious expression softened by evident affection for his children. "And for your kindness to Isabela. She has her mother's quick mind, but few outlets for it here." "She's a remarkable young woman," Elena replied sincerely. "You've done well raising her, especially under difficult circumstances." The statement hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken implications. Before Elena could formulate a response that wouldn't cross the boundaries of propriety, Señora Vargas intervened. "We should return to complete our day's work, Elena. Señor Hernandez, we will have the first items ready within 2 weeks, beginning with the most essential pieces for each child." On the walk back to town, Señora Vargas maintained thoughtful silence until they were nearly at the shop. Then, with uncharacteristic gentleness, she spoke. "Be careful with your heart, Elena. What appears as interest in your mind may be appreciation of your potential utility." "I've made no assumptions about Señor Hernandez's intentions," Elena protested, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "Perhaps not consciously," the widow conceded, "but I recognize the look of a woman who has found unexpected connection. Remember that for a man with 8 children, practical considerations often outweigh romantic ones." The warning, delivered without malice but with clear concern, left Elena examining her own reactions more critically. Had she responded to Mateo Hernandez's attention with unwarranted openness? Had she, of being the corbata, the unwanted one, made her vulnerable to the first man who seemed to value her intelligence rather than find it threatening? In the weeks that followed, these questions surfaced repeatedly as the Hernandez order progressed. True to her word, Señora Vargas permitted Isabella to visit the shop on Thursday afternoons, ostensibly to observe the business operations, but increasingly to receive informal lessons from Elena in mathematics and natural sciences. The girl's hunger for knowledge reminded Elena painfully of her own younger self, before the world had narrowed her options and labeled her unsuitable. Mateo Hernandez appeared regularly to check on the progress of the children's clothing, often bringing 1 or 2 of the younger ones with him. These visits, while ostensibly business-related, gradually expanded to include broader conversations about the children's education, the challenges of managing a large household alone, and occasionally, when privacy permitted, reflections on the limited options available to those who didn't conform to society's expectations. "Isabela tells me you were called corbata in Esperanza," he mentioned during one such visit, his tone casual but his eyes watchful for her reaction. An odd term for a woman who doesn't fit conventional patterns. Elena's hands stilled on the shirt she was hemming. People fear what sitter on the shirts their understanding of proper order. An educated woman without a husband challenges that tú las cheros, peppering. "And does it bother you, this label?" His question carried genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Elena considered carefully before answering. "What bothers me is not the label itself, but the limitations it imposes. In Esperanza, being corbata meant losing my teaching position, my independence, ultimately my home. It meant being seen as a problem to be solved, rather than a person with value beyond conventional roles. Mateo nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Cielo Azul isn't so different, though perhaps less quick to judge. Still, people notice your visits with Isabela, your kindness to my younger children when they accompany me here. They speculate. About what, precisely? Elena asked, suddenly wary. About whether the corbata from Esperanza might find unexpected purpose in a household that needs precisely what traditional wives are not taught to provide. His direct gaze met hers without pretense. Education. Independence of thought. Strength beyond the conventional. The implications of his statement hung between them, neither fully articulated nor easily dismissed. Before Elena could formulate a response, the shop door opened to admit new customers, ending their private conversation but not the questions it had raised in Elena's mind. That evening, as she helped Señora Vargas close the shop, the widow broached the subject that had clearly been on her mind. Mateo Hernandez spent considerable time in conversation with you today, she observed, her tone neutral. He's concerned about his children's education, Elena replied, focusing on arranging fabric bolts rather than meeting the older woman's eyes. Is that all he's concerned about? Elena turned to face her employer directly. What are you asking, señora? The widow sighed, setting aside her ledger. I'm asking if you understand what you potentially represent to a man in his position. 8 children without a mother, a household without proper management despite his best efforts, and here appears a woman with education, capability, and no better prospects. You make it sound calculating rather than genuine. Elena protested. Not calculating. Practical, Señora Vargas corrected. There is no shame in practical arrangements, Elena. Most marriages are based on them. But you should recognize clearly what is being valued. And what do you believe is being valued in this case? The widow's expression softened with unexpected compassion. Your usefulness, certainly. Perhaps also your kindness, your intelligence, your patience with his children. These are worthy qualities. But ask yourself, would he have noticed these qualities in the school teacher from Esperanza if he had met you before his wife's death left him overwhelmed with responsibilities? The question struck Elena with uncomfortable force. Would Mateo Hernandez have seen past the label of corbata if he didn't need precisely what that label represented? Education, independence, capability beyond conventional feminine accomplishments? Was his interest, however genuine it might, the growing connection between Elena and Mateo developed through autumn's gentle transition, as summer heat yielded to cooler days and the dusty streets of Cielo Azul transformed with occasional rain. Their conversations continued during his regular visits to the shop, each interaction revealing new layers of understanding beneath their outward circumstances. My wife Claudia died 3 years ago, Mateo explained one quiet afternoon as they sat in the shop's small courtyard, the younger children occupied with drawing materials Elena had provided. The fever took her quickly after Rafael's birth. In those first months, I moved through each day like a man underwater, barely able to breathe, focused only on keeping the children fed and sheltered. Elena listened, recognizing in his quiet grief echoes of her own losses, different in nature but similar in the forced resilience they had demanded. Isabela became a second mother overnight, he continued, watching his eldest daughter helping her youngest brother with his drawing. 14 years old, suddenly responsible for 7 siblings while I worked whatever jobs would feed them. She sacrificed her own childhood without complaint. She's remarkable, Elena agreed softly. Her mind is extraordinary. She absorbs mathematical concepts as naturally as breathing. Mateo's expression shifted to one of mingled pride and regret. Like her mother, Claudia could calculate complicated figures in her head faster than most men with paper and pencil. I had hoped to provide Isabela with education beyond what our circumstances have allowed. It's not too late, Elena suggested. Her quick mind can make up for lost time with proper guidance. From whom? Mateo asked, his gaze direct. The nearest proper school is in Santa Fe, and I cannot send her away. Cielo Azul offers nothing beyond basic instruction at the church. The unspoken implication hung between them. that Elena herself represented a solution to this particular challenge. Before she could respond, Señora Vargas appeared in the doorway, her expression making clear that the personal conversation had extended beyond appropriate business hours. As autumn deepened toward winter, Elena found herself increasingly involved with the Hernandez family beyond the initial clothing order. Isabella's Thursday lessons expanded to include her two younger sisters, who showed less academic inclination but equal appreciation for Elena's patient instruction. The youngest children grew accustomed to her presence, greeting her with unrestrained enthusiasm whenever she was spotted in town. Señora Vargas observed these developments with growing concern, finally confronting Elena directly after a particularly extended session with the Hernandez children had delayed the completion of other work. "You are becoming entangled in their lives," the widow stated bluntly. "This goes beyond business or charity." Elena carefully set aside the dress she was hemming. "The children need education. Isabella especially has remarkable potential that will be wasted without proper guidance. And their father, what does he need?" Señora Vargas's question cut to the heart of the matter. Elena met her employer's gaze steadily. "He needs help raising 8 children alone, while working to support them. Is that so unreasonable?" "It is entirely reasonable," the widow conceded. "The question is whether you understand the inevitable direction of such arrangements." "You believe he sees me merely as a convenient solution to his problems," Elena stated, giving voice to the concern that had lingered at the edges of her thoughts. Señora Vargas sighed, her expression softening. "Elena, in all my years of business, I've learned to recognize when people are calculating value. Mateo Hernandez is a good man, by all accounts. Hardworking, honest, devoted to his children. But he is also practical. A man with 8 children cannot afford romantic illusions about marriage." "Who said anything about marriage?" Elena protested, though the heat in her cheeks betrayed awareness of the unspoken possibility that had been growing between her and Mateo. "It is the inevitable conclusion if things continue as they are," the widow replied simply. "The question you must ask yourself is whether being valued primarily for your usefulness is enough. You left Esperanza because you were seen as an inconvenient misfit, a corbata. Here, your very differences make you precisely what a struggling widower needs. But is being needed the same as being truly seen?" The question haunted Elena through the following weeks as winter settled over Cielo Azul, bringing shorter days and cooler temperatures. Her interactions with Mateo took on new complexity as she scrutinized his words and actions for evidence of either genuine affection or merely practical assessment of her potential utility. The matter came to a head unexpectedly during the town's Christmas preparations. Elena had been enlisted to help create decorations for the church, her neat stitching valued for the delicate work of embroidering altar cloths with seasonal symbols. Working late one evening in the church anteroom, she was surprised when Mateo appeared in the doorway, his expression unusually hesitant. "Isabella mentioned you would be here," he explained, remaining at a respectful distance. "I hoped we might speak privately." Elena set aside her work, suddenly acutely aware of her isolation with him in the quiet church building. "Of course. Is everything well with the children?" "They are well, yes." He moved further into the room, removing his hat and turning it nervously in his hands. A gesture so reminiscent of Uncle Roberto, on the day he had announced her dismissal from the school, that Elena felt a flutter of apprehension. "Elena," he began, then paused, seeming to reconsider his approach. "Over these past months, I have come to greatly respect your intelligence, your kindness toward my children, your practical approach to life's challenges." She waited, the widow's warnings echoing in her mind. Was this the practical assessment she had feared, an evaluation of her usefulness rather than her person? "The children have flourished under your attention," he continued. "Isabella speaks of nothing but the knowledge you've shared. Even Rafael, who barely remembers his mother, has opened his heart to you." "They're wonderful children," Elena replied carefully. "Teaching them has brought me great joy." Mateo nodded, taking a step closer. "I've watched you with them. You see each one as an individual." not just needs to be met but unique spirits to be nurtured. It's a rare quality. He drew a deep breath, seeming to gather his courage. I came tonight to speak plainly, Elena. People in town talk, they see your involvement with my family, and make assumptions. Some say I seek a convenient mother for my children, a practical solution to my responsibilities. Elena's heart tightened. Señora Vargas's warnings, seemingly confirmed by his own admission. What they don't understand, Mateo continued, his voice softening, is that I had resigned myself to practicality. After Claudia died, I expected nothing more than perhaps finding a widow seeking security who might tolerate my children in exchange for a home. I never imagined finding someone who would see them, truly see them as you do. He moved closer still, close enough that Elena could see the earnestness in his eyes. You were labeled corbata in Esperanza because you didn't fit their narrow understanding of a woman's worth. When I first heard this, I thought it a strange term for someone who seems not mismatched, but precisely what has been missing, not just in my children's lives, but in mine. Elena remained silent, unable to formulate a response as her mind processed his words. I don't offer a convenient arrangement, Elena, Mateo said quietly. I offer a partnership. Your mind, your spirit, your strength, these are not useful accessories, but essential qualities I have come to admire deeply. You're the piece that has been missing, not because you can perform necessary tasks, but because, without you, our family remains incomplete. The declaration hung between them, sincere and unadorned. Elena studied his face, searching for any sign of calculation or mere practicality. What she found instead was vulnerability, the expression of a man risking rejection by revealing genuine feeling. Señora Vargas believes you see me as a solution to your problems, she finally said, needing to give voice to the concern that had troubled her. And what do you believe? Mateo asked simply. The directness of his question required equal honesty in response. I believe that what began as recognition of mutual usefulness has become something deeper. I care for your children not because they need me, but because they have claimed places in my heart. And you vision of mutual felicite. She paused, summoning courage. You have helped me see that being different, being corbata, isn't a flaw but perhaps my greatest strength. Mateo's expression softened with evident relief. Then we understand each other. I don't ask for an immediate answer, Elena. Consider carefully what life with 8 children and a man who works from sunrise to sunset would mean. It wouldn't be easy. But I promise you this, you would never again be valued only for conforming to others' expectations. Your mind, your independence, your strength, these are precisely what I admire most. The conversation was interrupted by the church caretaker arriving to lock the building for the night, but its implications lingered in Elena's thoughts as she returned to her small room above Señora Vargas's shop. Mateo had not formally proposed marriage. Propriety required more traditional approaches for that, but his declaration of intent had been unmistakable. That night, Elena slept little, weighing the unexpected future suddenly opened before her against the security, limited though it was, of her current position. By morning, she had reached no firm conclusion, but knew the time had come for an honest conversation with Señora Vargas, whose guidance, however stern, had been grounded in genuine concern for her welfare. The widow listened without interruption as Elena recounted Mateo's words, her expression revealing nothing until Elena had finished speaking. And what answer will you give him? She asked finally. I don't know, Elena admitted. My heart says one thing, but practical considerations say another. 8 children is a tremendous responsibility. Yet you've already assumed much of that responsibility, without being asked, Señora Vargas observed. Your Thursday lessons have expanded to 3 afternoons weekly. You spend Sundays with them after church. You've mended their clothing beyond what our business requires. Elena nodded, recognizing the truth in this assessment. But marriage would be different. I would be leaving the security of my position here, becoming completely dependent on Mateo's circumstances. Security, the widow repeated thoughtfully. Yes, that is the practical consideration. Yet, I wonder if you've considered that your position here, while secure for the moment, remains fundamentally dependent on my goodwill and continued health. I am not young, Elena. When I die, this business will likely be sold. Your security is an illusion. The blunt statement startled Elena with its truth. She had avoided confronting the temporary nature of her arrangement with Señora Vargas, preferring the comfort of present stability to the uncertainty of future changes. What would you advise me to do? She asked, genuinely seeking the older woman's wisdom. Señora Vargas considered the question carefully. When Antonio first showed interest in me, my father warned me against marrying a merchant with unconventional ideas about a wife's role in business. He feared I would become merely useful rather than cherished. A rare smile softened her features. What my father couldn't understand was that being truly valued for one's capabilities can be a deeper form of love than conventional romance. She reached across the table to cover Elena's hand with her own, an unprecedented gesture of personal connection. Mateo Hernandez offers you not just security but purpose. Not just acceptance but appreciation for precisely those qualities that made you corbata in Esperanza. That is rarer than you might realize. The widow's unexpected support shifted something in Elena's thinking, allowing her to see beyond the practical concerns to the deeper truth of what Mateo had offered. Not merely a position in his household but recognition of her authentic self. The Christmas season brought increased business to the shop, temporarily postponing any further significant conversations between Elena and Mateo. Their interactions remained cordial but contained a new awareness, an unspoken acknowledgement of possibilities waiting to be resolved. The children, particularly Isabella, sensed the shift, watching their exchanges with poorly concealed hope. On Christmas Eve, the entire town gathered for midnight mass, the church transformed by candlelight and evergreen boughs into a space of solemn beauty. Elena sat with Señora Vargas near the front, conscious of the Hernandez family, occupying a pew across the aisle, the younger children struggling to remain awake for the late service, while the older ones maintained reverent attention. As the congregation filed out after the final blessing, Mateo approached, his 8 children arrayed behind him like steps on a staircase. Feliz Navidad, Señorita Fuentes, Señora Vargas, he greeted them formally, though his eyes conveyed deeper meaning when they met Elena Siglo. We would be honored if you both would join us tomorrow for Christmas dinner. Before Señora Vargas could decline, as Elena expected, the widow surprised her with acceptance. We would be delighted, Señor Hernandez. What time shall we arrive? The next day, dawned clear and cold, the rare Christmas snow that had fallen overnight transforming Cielo Azul into a landscape of crystalline beauty. Elena dressed with particular care in her best dress, adding the shawl her mother had embroidered, a connection to her past as she contemplated a potential future. You've made your decision, Señora Vargas observed as they walked together toward the Hernandez home, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air. Is it so obvious? Elena asked. It's written in every gesture, the widow replied without judgment. You've found your place, unexpected though it may be. The Hernandez home had been transformed for the holiday. Handmade decorations adorned the walls, many clearly created by the children under Isabella's direction. A pine tree cut from the nearby hills occupied one corner, decorated with painted wooden ornaments and paper stars. The scent of traditional foods filled the air. Tamales, pozole, the sweet richness of buñuelos. The children greeted Elena with unbridled enthusiasm, pulling her into the home, to show her their various contributions to the preparations. Isabella had organized the younger ones with remarkable efficiency, assigning tasks appropriate to each child's abilities. Even 3-year-old Rafael had helped, proudly showing Elena the red paper chain he had pasted together for the tree. Throughout the meal, Elena observed the family dynamics with new awareness. The practiced chaos of serving 8 children, the shorthand communication between siblings, the way Mateo anticipated needs before they were voiced. This was not a family lacking organization or love, but one missing the balancing element that would complete its structure. After the meal, while the younger children played with simple gifts Mateo had provided, he invited Elena to walk in the orchard behind the house. Snow crunched beneath their feet as they moved among the dormant fruit trees, their bare branches etched against the clear blue sky. "My father planted these trees when he first claimed this land," Mateo explained, his voice soft with remembrance. He believed in creating legacy, something that would nourish his children and his children's children. "They're beautiful," Elena replied, admiring how the snow outlined each branch. "Even in winter dormancy, you can see their strength." Mateo stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "Elena, I've respected your need for time to consider what I spoke of in the church. But today, seeing you with the children, watching how naturally you fit within our home." He hesitated, then continued with quiet certainty. "I must speak plainly again." He took her gloved hands in his own. "In our community, there are those who see only what they expect to see. A widower seeking a mother for his children, a corbata finding security through useful service. What they cannot understand is how two people might recognize in each other precisely what the world has failed to value properly." Elena felt tears forming despite her effort to maintain composure. "And what do you see, Mateo?" "I see a woman whose mind and spirit equal my own," he answered simply. "Whose strength complements rather than threatens mine. Whose testosterone has jaundiced from conventional expectations, make her not mismatched but perfectly suited to join a family that has never fit conventional patterns either." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a simple ring of silver set with a small turquoise stone. "This was my mother's," he explained. "Given to her by my father when they decided to build a life together in this harsh but beautiful land." Mateo held the ring between them, a question and offer combined. Comillas, "I don't ask you to diminish yourself to fit our needs, Elena. I ask you to bring your full self, your mind, your knowledge, your strength, to complete what has been missing. Will you join your path with ours, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as the essential piece that makes our future possible?" The moments stretched between them, weighted with significance beyond the simple question of marriage. For Elena, it represented not merely acceptance but valuation of precisely those qualities that had made her corbata: her education, her independence of thought, her refusal to diminish herself to meet conventional expectations. "Yes," she answered finally, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "Not because I need security, or you need help, but because together, we create something neither of us could build alone." When Mateo slipped the ring onto her finger, the simple gesture carried profound meaning, not possession but partnership, not subjugation but completion. Together they walked back toward the house where Señora Vargas and the children awaited, their footprints leaving parallel tracks in the snow, separate but aligned toward a common destination. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Cielo Azul, generating precisely the spectrum of reactions Elena had anticipated. Some viewed it as a practical arrangement benefiting both parties: a widower gaining maternal care for his children, a corbata securing position and purpose. Others, particularly those who had interacted with Elena through the shop or church activities, recognized the genuine connection that had formed, understanding that Mateo valued precisely those qualities that had made Elena unsuitable in conventional estimations. Señora Vargas, to Elena's surprise, became their most vocal supporter, silencing gossip with sharp reminders of Mateo's respected position and Elena's valuable contributions to the community. The widow also proved unexpectedly generous, insisting that Elena's work in the shop had earned her a small dowry, not traditional goods but fabric, sewing tools, and most precious of all, a portion of the business's reference books and pattern collections. "You have a natural talent for this work," she told Elena as they packed the materials. "The children will need clothes, and perhaps in time, others in Cielo Azul will seek your skills. What I give you is not charity but recognition of your capabilities. The wedding took place in early February, a simple ceremony in the church, where their conversation had first revealed deeper feelings. Elena wore a dress she had made herself, incorporating elements of traditional design with subtle modifications that reflected her individual taste. The Hernandez children stood as attendants, Isabela serving as primary witness, with a pride that transcended her 15 years. Life as Elena Hernandez unfolded with challenges and joys that confirmed both her decision and Mateo's faith in their partnership. The transition from independent woman to wife and mother of 8 proved neither simple nor without moments of doubt, yet the fundamental rightness of their union provided foundation for navigating each difficulty. Isabela flourished under Elena's continued guidance, her mathematical abilities developing to the point where the local bank manager offered her part-time work helping with complex calculations. The younger children responded differently to their new mother, some with immediate acceptance, others requiring patience and consistent love to overcome lingering grief for the mother they had lost. 3 months after the wedding, as a spring transformed the orchard into a cloud of delicate blossoms, Mateo found Elena sitting alone beneath the trees, her expression thoughtful as she watched the petals drift on the gentle breeze. "Contemplating nature's renewal?" he asked, settling beside her on the wooden bench his father had built decades earlier. "Contemplating unexpected paths," Elena replied, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "6 months ago, I was the corbata of Esperanza, sent away because I didn't fit their understanding of a woman's proper place. Now I find myself precisely where I belong, valued for the very qualities they rejected." Mateo covered her hand with his, the simple gold band on her finger catching the dappled sunlight. "I've been thinking about that word, corbata. In Spanish, it means tie, something that binds, connects, holds things together." His voice carried quiet amusement. "Perhaps those who labeled you so meant it as criticism, but they accidentally spoke truth. You are indeed the tie that binds our family together, that connects past to future, that holds us all in proper relation to each other." Elena smiled at the reinterpretation. "A corbata has another quality, you know. It completes an outfit. ADD's the final touch that transforms the ordinary into the distinguished, comillas." "Precisely," Mateo agreed, his expression warm with affection. "You are the piece that completes us, that transforms what was broken into something whole again." As they sat together watching the orchard blossom into new life, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from rejection to redemption, from isolation to belonging. The label that had once defined her limitations now described her essential function, the tie that bound, the piece that completed, the element that transformed. In finding Mateo and his children, Elena had discovered not merely acceptance, but celebration of her differences. In choosing to join their unconventional family, she had transformed corbata from insult to identity, the one who connects, completes, and creates wholeness from fragments. The path ahead would contain challenges, certainly. 8 children with individual needs and personalities guaranteed complexity. Limited resources would require creativity and sacrifice. The community's expectations would create occasional friction. Yet Elena faced these prospects, not with resignation but with confidence born of knowing she was precisely where she belonged, valued, not despite her differences but because of them. As the orchard petals drifted around them like gentle snow, Elena leaned her head against Mateo's shoulder, feeling the rightness of their connection. "Who would have thought," she murmured, "that being sold as a corbata would lead to finding my true worth?" "Those who truly see value," Mateo replied, his arm drawing her closer, "recognize it even when others miss it entirely." Together they watched as Isabela emerged from the house, younger siblings in tow, coming to join them beneath the blossoming trees. A family unconventional in composition, but unified in purpose, each member essential to its completion. The first year of marriage brought transformations to the Hernandez household that unfolded like the seasons in the orchard, each change bringing new challenges and unexpected beauty. Elena's integration into the family wasn't simply about assuming responsibilities, but about weaving her unique strengths into the existing fabric of their lives. Spring arrived with its particular demands on a household managing both children and land. The vegetable garden required preparation, the orchard needed tending, and the children's education continued alongside daily chores. Elena approached these challenges with the same methodical problem-solving that had served her as a teacher, creating systems that distributed work according to ability and interest. Everyone contributes according to their gifts, she explained to 10-year-old Miguel, who complained about his sister Lucia being assigned fewer outdoor chores. Lucia's talent for organization keeps our pantry functioning, while your strength helps with the heavier garden work. Different tasks, equal importance. This philosophy, valuing diverse contributions rather than enforcing rigid equality, became fundamental to their family culture. Isabela continued developing her mathematical abilities, now balancing her responsibilities at home with her work at the bank 3 mornings weekly. The younger children found their own niches. Artistic Lucia designed embroidery patterns that Elena taught her to execute. Thoughtful Gabriel showed remarkable patience with animals, taking primary responsibility for the family's small livestock. Energetic twins, Thomas and Teresa, became the garden specialists, competing to grow the largest vegetables. Even 3-year-old Rafael found purpose, solemnly carrying messages between family members and announcing meal times with ceremonial importance. The older children sometimes teased that Rafael considered himself Elena's official assistant, shadowing her steps whenever possible, and mimicking her organizational habits with his toys. One warm May afternoon, Elena sat on the porch mending clothes, while supervising the younger children in the yard. Mateo had ridden to a neighboring ranch to help with cattle branding, and Isabela was at the bank. 6-year-old Teresa approached Kurong. Her expression unusually serious. "Mama Elena," she began, using the name the children had organically adopted. "Sofia Martinez said you're not our real mother, because you didn't grow us in your belly." Elena set aside her mending, giving Teresa her full attention. Such moments required honesty wrapped in reassurance. "Precisely," Mateo agreed, his expression warm with affection. "You are the piece that completes us, that transforms what was broken into something whole again." As they sat together watching the orchard blossom into new life, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from rejection to redemption, from isolation to belonging. The label that had once defined her limitations now described her essential function, the tie that bound, the piece that completed, the element that transformed. In finding Mateo and his children, Elena had discovered not merely acceptance, but celebration of her differences. In choosing to join their unconventional family, she had transformed corbata from insult to identity, the one who connects, completes, and creates wholeness from fragments. The path ahead would contain challenges, certainly. 8 children, with individual needs and personalities, guaranteed complexity. Limited resources would require creativity and sacrifice. The community's expectations would create occasional friction. Yet Elena faced these prospects, not with resignation, but with confidence born of knowing she was precisely where she belonged. Valued not despite her differences, but because of them. As the orchard petals drifted around them like gentle snow, Elena leaned her head against Mateo's shoulder, feeling the rightness of their connection. "Who would have thought," she murmured, "that being sold as a corbata would lead to finding my true worth?" "Those who truly see value," Mateo replied, his arm drawing her closer, "recognize it even when others miss it entirely." Together they watched as Isabela emerged from the house, younger siblings in tow, coming to join them beneath the blossoming trees, a family unconventional in composition but unified in purpose, each member essential to its completion. The first year of marriage brought transformations to the Hernandez household that unfolded like the seasons in the orchard, each change bringing new challenges and unexpected beauty. Elena's integration into the family wasn't simply about assuming responsibilities, but about weaving her unique strengths into the existing fabric of their lives. Spring arrived with its particular demands on a household managing both children and land. The vegetable garden required preparation, the orchard needed tending, and the children's education continued alongside daily chores. Elena approached these challenges with the same methodical problem-solving that had served her as a teacher, creating systems that distributed work according to ability and interest. Everyone contributes according to their gifts, she explained to 10-year-old Miguel, who complained about his sister Lucia being assigned fewer outdoor chores. Lucia's talent for organization keeps our pantry functioning, while your strength helps with the heavier garden work. Different tasks equal importance. This philosophy, valuing diverse contributions rather than enforcing rigid equality, became fundamental to their family culture. Isabella continued developing her mathematical abilities, now balancing her responsibilities at home with her work at the bank 3 mornings weekly. The younger children found their own niches. Artistic Lucia designed embroidery patterns that Elena taught her to execute. Thoughtful Gabriel showed remarkable patience with animals, taking primary responsibility for the family's small livestock. Energetic twins, Tomás and Teresa, became the garden specialists, competing to grow the largest vegetables. Even 3-year-old Rafael found purpose, solemnly carrying messages between family members and announcing meal times with ceremonial importance. The older children sometimes teased that Rafael considered himself Elena's official assistant, shadowing her steps whenever possible, and mimicking her organizational habits with his toys. One warm May afternoon, Elena sat on the porch mending clothes while supervising the younger children in the yard. Mateo had ridden to a neighboring ranch to help with cattle branding, and Isabella was at the bank. 6-year-old Teresa approached, her expression unusually serious. "Mama Elena," she began, using the name the children had organically adopted. "Sofia Martinez said you're not our real mother, because you didn't grow us in your belly." Elena set aside her mending, giving Teresa her full attention. Such moments required honesty wrapped in reassurance. "I've been calculating our orchard's production," she explained, spreading detailed notes across the kitchen table. "If we preserve the fruit more efficiently and market directly to merchants in Santa Fe rather than selling only to local buyers, we could increase profits by nearly 30%. Elena studied the girl's meticulous figures with growing appreciation. "These calculations are impressively thorough, Isabella. Have you discussed this with your father?" Isabella nodded, her expression serious, beyond her 15 years. "Papa agrees the numbers make sense, but says approaching the Santa Fe merchants requires presentation skills he doesn't possess." She hesitated before continuing. "He suggested that you, with your education and articulation, might help develop a proper business proposal." The request represented more than a simple business opportunity. It acknowledged Elena's unique contributions to the family, not just maternal care, but intellectual capabilities that complemented Mateo's practical knowledge. Together, they could expand possibilities beyond what either could accomplish alone. The orchard project became a family enterprise, with Isabella managing calculations, Mateo overseeing production improvements, and Elena developing formal business correspondence and presentation materials. Even the younger children contributed, with artistic Lucia designing labels for preserved fruit and the twins developing innovative packing methods to prevent bruising during transport. Their first meeting with Santa Fe merchants, scheduled for early autumn, required both Elena and Mateo to travel overnight, the first time Elena would be separated from the younger children since their marriage. The evening before their departure, as Elena prepared final details for the household's functioning in her absence, she found 7-year-old Lucia sitting alone on the porch, unnaturally quiet. "What troubles you, pequeña?" Elena asked, settling beside the girl whose artistic talents so closely matched her own love of beauty. Lucia studied her hands, avoiding Elena's eyes. "What if you don't come back?" The question revealed depths of insecurity that the child normally kept hidden beneath cheerful creativity. Elena immediately recognized its source. Lucia had been 4 when her birth mother died, old enough to remember the loss but too young to fully process it. "Lucia, look at me," Elena requested gently. When the girl raised her eyes, Elena continued, "I promise you I will return. Your father and I are only going to Santa Fe for business, and we'll be home in 3 days." "Mama Claudia went to heaven and never came back," Lucia whispered, giving voice to the fear that had clearly been building. Elena gathered the child into her arms, holding her close. "Your mother's death was a great sadness that nothing could prevent, but this journey is different. It's planned, expected, with a clear return." She stroked Lucia's hair soothingly. "And I've left detailed instructions with Isabella. You know how thorough your sister is about following directions exactly." This earned a small smile from Lucia, who had occasionally complained about Isabella's strict adherence to Elena's household systems. "While I'm away," Elena continued, inspiration striking. "Would you create something special for me? Perhaps designs for new embroidery we could work on together when I return?" The distraction technique worked as Lucia's natural creativity engaged with the challenge. "I could design patterns for all the seasons," she suggested, her expression brightening, "with special symbols for each family member." "That would be a treasure beyond price," Elena affirmed. "And it will give us a project to begin immediately upon my return, which will absolutely happen in 3 days." The Santa Fe journey proved transformative for both the family's finances and Elena's standing in the community. The merchants, impressed by the combination of Elena's polished presentation and Mateo's practical knowledge, agreed to purchase the Hernandez orchard's entire preserved fruit production at prices significantly higher than local markets offered. The contract they signed would provide financial stability that had eluded the family since Claudia's death. When they returned to Cielo Azul, news of their success traveled quickly. Families who had previously viewed Elena's education as an oddity, the defining characteristic of a corbata, now reconsidered its practical value. Several approached Mateo about the possibility of Elena providing advanced lessons to their children, particularly daughters whose academic interests extended beyond basic literacy. "They see your value now," Mateo observed as they discussed these requests, "though only in terms they understand financial benefit." Elena considered this thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's the necessary first step. Acceptance often begins with recognizing practical advantages before deeper understanding develops." By winter, Elena had established a small teaching circle that met 3 afternoons weekly in the Hernandez front room. 6 students, ranging from 12 to 16 years old, received instruction in advanced mathematics, literature, and natural sciences, subjects previously unavailable to Cielo Azul's children, without traveling to larger cities for education. The teaching circle brought unexpected healing to the community's perception of Elena. No longer simply the corbata who married the widower Hernandez, she became Maestra Elena, who opened educational doors previously closed to local families. The very qualities that had made her unsuitable in Esperanza now distinguished her as a valuable community asset in Cielo Azul. On a crisp December morning, as Elena prepared materials for the day's lessons, Señora Vargas arrived unexpectedly at their door. The widow had visited occasionally since the wedding, maintaining a somewhat formal but genuinely supportive relationship with Elena. Today, however, her expression carried unusual gravity. "May I speak with you privately?" she requested after exchanging greetings with the children who were completing morning chores. Elena led her former employer to the kitchen, where a pot of coffee kept warm on the stove. As she poured cups for them both, Elena noted the widow's uncharacteristic hesitation. "You've created something remarkable here," Señora Vargas observed, glancing around the orderly kitchen, where evidence of Elena's organizational systems was visible in labeled containers and efficiently arranged tools. "The children are thriving. Your teaching circle is becoming known even in Santa Fe. You've found your purpose." "With your help," Elena acknowledged, setting a coffee cup before the older woman. "Your guidance and support made this possible." The widow waved away the gratitude. "I merely provided temporary shelter. You built this life through your own strength and vision." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "I've come today with news and a proposal." Elena waited, recognizing the significance of whatever would follow. I'm returning to Mexico City, Señora Vargas announced. My sister is ailing, and I'm the only family remaining. At my age, another move should seem daunting, but, she sighed. Family obligations remain paramount. The shop? Elena asked, immediately understanding the implications. That's why I'm here. The widow reached into her pocket and withdrew a folded document. This is the deed to Vargas Costuras, with legal transfer to your name, should you wish to accept it. Elena stared at the document in shock. Señora Vargas, I couldn't possibly. You can and you should, the widow interrupted firmly. The business has value only if continued by someone who understands both the craft and the accounts. You're the only person in Cielo Azul with that combination of skills. But the monetary value is less important to me than seeing my husband's legacy continue. The widow's expression softened. Elena, when you arrived from Esperanza, I warned you about being valued only for your usefulness. I see now that I underestimated both you and Mateo Hernandez. You've built a partnership that honors your unique qualities while creating something neither could achieve alone. She pushed the document across the table. I'm offering this for the same reason. Recognition that your particular combination of skills makes you uniquely suited to continue what Antonio and I built. Not charity, not sentiment, but practical recognition of capability. The offer represented more than a business transaction. It acknowledged Elena's journey from unwanted corbata to valued community member, from displaced teacher to woman of multiple capabilities. The shop would provide additional income for the family while allowing Elena to maintain both her teaching and her role in the Hernandez household. I would need to discuss this with Mateo, Elena said finally. Such a significant commitment affects our entire family. Of course, Señora Vargas agreed. But I suspect he will see, as I do, that this represents not additional burden, but natural extension of the path you've already chosen, using your unique abilities to create value where others might see only unconventional choices. Comillas. That evening, after the younger children were asleep, Elena and Mateo sat at the kitchen table reviewing the unexpected offer. Isabela joined them, her growing role in family decisions acknowledged through her inclusion in significant conversations. The practical considerations are straightforward, Isabela noted, having already calculated potential impacts on family finances. Even operating the shop at reduced hours to accommodate your teaching and family responsibilities, the income would exceed what we currently allocate for clothing and household goods. Mateo studied his eldest daughter with pride before turning to Elena. The financial benefits are clear, but the more important question is whether this aligns with your vision for your place in our family and community. The thoughtful inquiry exemplified why their partnership worked. Mateo consistently considered not just practical outcomes, but alignment with deeper purpose. Elena took a moment to order her thoughts before responding. When I left Esperanza, labeled corbata, and sent away because I didn't conform to expectations, I never imagined finding not just acceptance, but celebration of the very qualities others rejected. She looked between Mateo and Isabela, seeing in both the same quiet strength and respect for her capabilities. This offer from Señora Vargas represents opportunity to extend that principle beyond our family, to demonstrate that unconventional talents create unexpected value. You're thinking of more than just operating the shop, Mateo observed, reading the deeper consideration in her expression. Elena nodded. The shop could become another form of teaching, a place where girls like Isabela might learn not just sewing but business management, not just traditional skills, but how to apply them in innovative ways. Isabela's eyes brightened with understanding. You could take apprentices, girls who might otherwise have no opportunity to develop such skills. Exactly, Elena confirmed. The shop becomes not just commercial enterprise but extension of the educational principles we're building in our home and teaching circle. Mateo reached for her hand across the table. You continue to transform limitations into possibilities, Elena. When others saw corbata, misfit, at peace, you recognized the opportunity to connect seemingly disparate elements into something stronger than either alone. His words captured precisely what Elena had come to understand about herself and her place in the world. The very qualities that had made her unsuitable in traditional estimations now allowed her to bridge separate worlds: education and practical skills, intellectual pursuit and family nurturing, traditional crafts, and innovative business approaches. "Then we are agreed?" she asked, looking between her husband and stepdaughter. "We accept Señora Vargas's offer, integrating the shop into our family enterprises?" Their affirmative responses sealed the decision, but Isabela added an observation that crystallized the deeper significance. "In Esperanza, they sold you off for being corbata, the odd piece that didn't match their pattern. But here, that same uniqueness makes you the essential piece that completes multiple patterns: our family, your students, and now the business community." The wisdom in the young woman's assessment, recognizing that context, not character, often determines how one's qualities are valued, struck Elena deeply. "You've identified an important truth, Isabela. The same characteristics can be liabilities or assets, depending on whether those around us can recognize their potential contribution." That night, as Elena and Mateo prepared for sleep, she shared a realization that had been forming throughout the day. "When I first heard myself called corbata in Esperanza, I accepted it as criticism, acknowledgement that I didn't fit the pattern of what a proper woman should be. Later, when you suggested it actually meant I was the tie that binds our family together, I embraced that more positive interpretation." Mateo listened attentively as she continued. "But today, watching Isabela apply her mathematical gifts to calculating the shop's potential contribution to our family's welfare, I realized something deeper. Perhaps being corbata, being the unique piece that doesn't match conventional patterns, is actually my greatest gift. It allows me to connect worlds that would otherwise remain separate: education with practical skills, traditional family roles with innovative approaches, your children's past with their future possibilities. The bridge between worlds," Mateo suggested, his expression warm with understanding. "Connecting what others see as separate domains. Comillas?" "Yes," Elena agreed, the concept crystallizing further as she articulated it. "And that's what I want our children to understand, especially the girls. Being different, being the piece that doesn't seem to fit conventional patterns, can become your greatest strength if you find where that unique shape creates necessary connections." Mateo drew her close, his embrace communicating deeper understanding than words could express. "You've transformed what was meant as rejection into your most powerful contribution, Elena, not despite being corbata but because of it." Spring returned to Cielo Azul, marking a full year since Elena had joined the Hernandez family. The orchard blossomed again, now with expanded production areas developed through the winter based on Isabela's calculations. The teaching circle had grown to include 8 regular students, with several families from neighboring communities inquiring about possible enrollment. The shop, renamed Fuentes Hernandez Costuras to honor both its origin and new direction, operated 3 days weekly under Elena's guidance, with Isabela assuming management responsibilities on alternate days. On a particularly beautiful April morning, Elena stood in the orchard, watching the children distribute irrigation water through channels they had helped design and build. Each contributed according to their abilities. Isabella directing the overall operation, Gabriel managing the water flow rates, the twins clearing debris that might block channels, Lucia and Miguel supporting younger siblings in age-appropriate tasks. Even Rafael, now 4, participated by reporting dry spots he discovered on his, quote, inspection rounds. Mateo joined her, slipping an arm around her waist as they observed the scene together. They worked together like a well-designed machine, he noted with evident pride. Each performing their function, creating something greater than any could accomplish alone. Like a family should, Elena agreed, leaning slightly against his shoulder. Not identical parts performing identical functions, but unique contributions creating harmonious whole. A philosophy you've helped us develop, Mateo acknowledged. Before you came, I focused primarily on ensuring they had necessities, food, shelter, basic education. You've shown us how to build beyond survival to true flourishing. Elena watched as Isabela patiently explained a calculation to Miguel, showing him how to determine optimal water distribution based on soil conditions and plant needs. The scene exemplified what Elena had hoped to cultivate, not just academic knowledge, but its practical application, not just individual achievement, but collaborative problem solving. "They're learning the lesson I wish I'd understood earlier," she observed. That being different, being corbata, isn't a flaw to overcome, but potentially your greatest contribution if you find where that unique shape creates necessary connections. "A lesson for our community as well," Mateo added. "The same people who whispered about the corbata from Esperanza now send their children to learn from you, bring their special garment needs to your shop, seek your advice on business correspondence." Elena smiled at the irony. "They still see me as different, but now that difference has value they recognize." "The truly valuable lessons rarely follow conventional patterns," Mateo replied, his expression thoughtful as he watched their children work together. "Like the irrigation system the children have built, it follows the natural contours of the land, rather than imposing artificial straight lines, more efficient because it respects the existing terrain while directing resources where needed." The analogy captured perfectly what Elena had attempted to build within their family and her various educational initiatives, systems that recognized and respected individual differences, while creating structured channels for growth and development. As they stood together watching the children complete their work, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from rejection in Esperanza to this moment of profound belonging. The label meant to diminish her had instead defined her greatest strength: the ability to connect diverse elements into stronger, more resilient systems. "What are you thinking?" Mateo asked, noting her contemplative expression. "That being sold off as corbata led me to discover my true worth," Elena replied, echoing words they had shared months earlier but with deeper understanding now. "Not despite being different, but precisely because that difference allowed me to become the piece that completes multiple puzzles: our family, my students' education, the business community." Mateo nodded, his arm tightening slightly around her waist. "The essential connector that transforms separate elements into harmonious whole." As the children finished their work and began gathering tools, calling to each other with the easy camaraderie they had developed, Elena embraced the identity she had once rejected: corbata, the tie that binds, the piece that connects, the element that completes. What had been intended as exclusion had become her most powerful inclusion, transforming not just her own life, but creating ripples of possibility that extended to her family, students, and community. Isabela approached, her calculations notebook in hand, ready to review the morning's work with them. The other children followed, each eager to report their contributions and observations. Elena welcomed them with the quiet confidence of a woman who had found her place, not by conforming to others' expectations, but by transforming her unique qualities into essential connections that created something greater than any single pattern could contain. In the blossoming orchard surrounded by the family that had recognized her true value, Elena Fuentes Hernandez embraced her identity as corbata. Not misfit but connector, not odd piece but essential element, not rejection but completion. 5 years transformed the Hernandez family and Cielo Azul itself in ways no one could have predicted when Elena first arrived as the corbata from Esperanza. What began as one woman's journey from rejection to acceptance had catalyzed changes that rippled outward, touching lives far beyond their immediate household. The Fuentes Hernandez Costura shop had evolved from simple tailor's establishment to a center for both practical craftsmanship and education. Elena's innovative approach, combining traditional sewing skills with business management training, attracted young women from surrounding communities who sought more than conventional domestic preparation. "My father insisted I learn a practical trade before considering marriage," explained Josefina Ortega, the merchant's daughter who had become Elena's most dedicated apprentice. "He expected me to simply master basic tailoring. But what you've taught me about managing accounts and inventory has transformed how I view my future possibilities." Elena's teaching circle had similarly expanded, now occupying a dedicated building constructed on the edge of their property. 28 students attended regular sessions, divided by age and ability rather than gender. Another departure from traditional educational approaches that had initially raised eyebrows but gradually gained acceptance as results became evident. The orchard business, under Isabella's increasingly sophisticated management, had grown to supply merchants throughout the territory. Now 19, Isabella had developed a reputation for business acumen that drew respect from men 3 times her age. Several had approached Mateo about potential marriage arrangements, but Isabella had firmly established her intention to delay matrimony until she had fully implemented her 5-year expansion plan for the family enterprises. There will be time for family building after I've established the systems that ensure our continued prosperity, she explained to Elena during one of their regular planning sessions. You've shown me that a woman's value extends beyond traditional roles. I intend to explore those possibilities thoroughly before considering marriage. The other Hernandez children had developed along equally distinctive paths, each finding unique ways to contribute to family and community. 17-year-old Gabriel had discovered remarkable talent for engineering, designing irrigation improvements that neighboring ranchers now paid to implement on their properties. 15-year-old twins Tomás and Teresa had transformed their early interest in gardening into systematic agricultural experimentation, developing drought-resistant vegetable varieties adapted to local conditions. 15-year-old Lucia's artistic talents had blossomed beyond simple embroidery designs to include painting and illustration. Her carefully rendered botanical drawings accompanied the agricultural records her siblings maintained, documenting their experimental results with scientific precision. Coming from the Martinez family, long considered arbiters of traditional propriety, it signaled profound change in how Elena's innovations were perceived. I would be honored to work with Consuela in developing her natural abilities, Elena responded warmly. Perhaps we could design an apprenticeship that combines both the shop's management aspects and appropriate subjects from the teaching circle. Relief visibly washed over Señora Martinez's features. You understand then. She needs direction that acknowledges her differences rather than trying to eliminate them. She hesitated again before adding, I was wrong about you, Señor Hernandez. When you first came to Cielo Azul, I saw only how you didn't fit traditional patterns. I failed to recognize that new patterns might better serve our changing world. The admission, clearly difficult for a woman of Señora Martinez's pride, represented the transformed perception Elena had gradually earned through consistent demonstration of her values rather than defensive arguments. We all have different gifts to contribute, Elena replied simply. The challenge is creating systems that allow those diverse gifts to strengthen the whole community, rather than being suppressed to maintain familiar patterns. After finalizing arrangements for Consuela's apprenticeship, Elena closed the shop early and walked toward home, reflecting on the significance of the conversation. What had begun as her personal journey had become a pathway others could follow, not to duplicate her specific choices, but to recognize that different shapes could create valuable connections within community structures. At home, she found Mateo in the orchard with Gabriel and Rafael, examining a new irrigation system Gabriel had designed to reduce water usage during increasingly dry summers. The site of 3 generations of Hernandez men, Mateo's father had planted these trees decades earlier, working together to improve rather than merely maintain what they had inherited, embodied the family philosophy they had developed together. Señora Martinez visited the shop today, she announced as she joined them among the trees. Mateo raised an eyebrow, his expression combining surprise with amusement. Social call or continued assessment of our unconventional household? Neither, Elena replied, smiling at his accurate characterization of the woman's previous interactions. She came to request a formal apprenticeship for Consuela, focusing on business management rather than traditional domestic skills. Gabriel whistled softly in surprise. The Martinez family, requesting non-traditional education for a daughter? Perhaps the world truly is changing. Or perhaps Rafael suggested with the directness of childhood? they finally noticed that Mama Elena's different way of doing things works better. Mateo ruffled his youngest son's hair affectionately. Wisdom from our mathematician. Yes, your mother's approaches work better precisely because they recognize and utilize differences rather than trying to eliminate them. That evening, as the extended family gathered for dinner, now including 2 apprentices who lived with them during training, Elena observed the scene with quiet satisfaction. Isabela discussed production projections with Mateo, while Lucia showed Josefina new design concepts for product labels. The twins debated irrigation adjustments with Gabriel while Miguel helped Carmen and Rafael set the table according to their established system. What might appear chaotic to outsiders reflected instead the harmonious integration of different strengths working toward common purpose. The fundamental philosophy Elena had cultivated within their family and gradually extended to their enterprises and educational initiatives. After dinner, as the younger children completed homework under Isabela's supervision, Mateo invited Elena to walk with him through the orchard. The evening air carried the scent of ripening fruit, and the setting sun cast long shadows across rows of trees heavy with the season's production. I received a letter from the Territorial Education Office today, he revealed as they walked between the trees their family had tended together for years. They're establishing a commission to develop standards for rural education throughout New Mexico Territory. Elena nodded, having heard rumors of such initiatives as American governance structures increasingly influence the region. That could improve educational access for isolated communities, she observed, though much depends on the standards they establish. Indeed, Mateo agreed, which is why they're seeking experienced educators to serve as advisors, particularly those who understand the territory's unique cultural context and practical needs. He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. They've specifically requested your participation, Elena. Comillas.